You're watching Childcare in West Texas, a Basin PBS Town Hall, live from the Anwar Family Studio at Basin PBS, sponsored by Diamondback Energy.
Childcare is important for everyone, and in West Texas, childcare is a problem. It's important for obvious reasons that children should be well cared for, but it is equally important for economic reasons. Businesses are struggling to find employees, working families are struggling to find childcare, and childcare programs are struggling to find staff. How big is the problem in West Texas? What can be done to address it? And why should citizens who don't have young children care? These are among the questions for tonight's town hall. I'm Becky Ferguson, coming to you live from Basin PBS Anwar Family Studio. Tonight's town hall is made possible by our generous sponsor, Diamondback Energy. So let's get started by introducing our panelists. Ed Mayberry is the owner of Toya's Precious Daycare Center. Lunice Brown is the director of the Odessa College Children's Center. Patty Stewart is the Child Care Program Specialist of the Permian Basin Workforce Development Board. Adrian Carrasco serves on the Board of Directors of the Literacy Coalition of the Permian Basin and is the president of Premier Energy. Brooks Landgraf is a member of the Texas House of Representatives representing the Odessa area. Dr. Adrian Vega is the executive director of the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin. And Dustin Fawcett is county judge for Ector County. Welcome all of you panelists, and thank you so much for being with us this evening. I'd like to start by defining our problem. So Dr. Vega, I'm going to go to you and ask you to tell us about the Permian Basin Child Care Landscape Analysis.
Sure, thank you, Becky. So once again, I serve as the Executive Director for the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin. We are a backbone organization or an intermediary organization, and our sole purpose for existence is to help improve educational outcomes in the entire region through cross-sector partnerships, cradle to career. So this really is an issue for us that really falls in the birth to 5, birth to 8 space. But even though we're cradle to career, which we're also trying to build out educational pipelines and pathways, childcare is actually a workforce issue. It's not just about early learning. And so in early 2022, the Texas Workforce Commission, they were trying to gather information across the state and communities across the state, because childcare is an issue that's not only a challenge for us here in West Texas, but it's something throughout the state. And so they had commissioned, or they sent out an RFP to gather some information. And so the Permian Strategic Partnership, their workforce committee, in conjunction with the Permian Basin Workforce Development Board, co-funded a study to be conducted. And so we were awarded the opportunity to conduct that analysis. So the analysis basically took into account the 17 counties that fall under the Permian Basin Workforce Development Board. And so there were really 4 driving questions that we were trying to seek in addressing this challenge. So the first question is, what is the current capacity of early learning space in the Permian Basin? So we're going to talk about that. So number one, what the study showed is we don't have enough seats, and we'll get into that. What are the most critical challenges posed to child care centers as a small business? And so one of our panelists here is owner of a small business, so Ed will be able to speak to that. How can all employers, community stakeholders, and leaders contribute to the child care industry? And so this is really the driving question for all of us and the audience who is listening today. And then what are some immediate and long-term action steps to address these challenges to the child care industry? So I'm going to give y'all some data that came from this study. So interesting note. So number one, there are about 100,000 children newborn to 6th grade. Now, why do I say 6th grade? Because technically child care We typically think of infants or toddlers,
Right.
but childcare actually goes up to school-age children, because when you think about before school or after school, they need some sort of care. So there's over about 100,000 children within that age range in these 17 counties. About 51,000 of those are under the age of 6. Okay, and by 2027, that's projected to grow by about 31%. So when you take that into consideration, here's really, I don't want to say the crisis, but here's the reality. We only, if all of the child care centers that we have were at capacity, that only would address or would provide seats for about 16,000. Okay, I said that there are close to 100,000. So that's really like 16%. So what that's saying is 84% of our children of child care age, there's not a seat, right? So one of the biggest findings was we don't have enough seats, okay? In surveying all the child care providers as well, another major challenge is staff retention, okay? And one of the reasons that is that the average wage of a child care worker is $11 an hour. And that ranges from $7.75 to $16. The state average is $10.15. So here's another, I don't want to say shocking, what is shocking, right? Child care workers make less than 98% of all other occupations. Okay, that's alarming, okay? Food and groceries was the largest expense reported outside of payroll. And so these were some of the key findings. I would also say another finding is in Texas, the average family spends about $16,000 a year on child care. Some of the other things I wanted to bring. So here's are some of the recommendations that from this finding. So how can we solve this, or what are some ways? How can we create more seats? So one big way is for third-party model or operator model. So I know that, for example, some of the oil and gas companies were able to come together and bring like Primrose or some of these entities. So that definitely could provide more seats. Another possibility or solution is through cross-sector partnerships. Okay, and I know that Judge Fawcett will reference this. But through the state, so there's different ways you can do this. So Senate Bill 1882, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but basically that is a bill that allows for districts to partner with community entities, and one way that they can do that is for child care seats. So for example, here's two concrete examples. In Odessa, Ector County ISD, through this Senate Bill 1882, partnered with the YMCA to open up more 3-year-old seats. Okay? In Midland, Midland College partnered with MISD to basically open up their early learning center. Now, that's great. That's wonderful. Yay, okay, we have more seats for 3-year-olds. But as Ed would tell you, well, wait a minute, that's our bread and butter. We own a child care center. So through coalitions, by bringing people to the table, we can begin to sort this out in terms of saying there's enough kids to go around. We just said we don't have enough seats. But if the child care providers are saying, okay, ISDs or partners, that's great if you are going to take on 3-year-olds, and let's say we take on infants, but now you're talking about more costs. Right? So these are just some of the solutions. I know we'll get into it more. I guess the last thing I'll say is, and this is important to know as well, so there's a definition that's referred to as a child care desert. And what the child care desert by definition is that any zip code that has 30 or more children of child care age, but where there's a demand for seats 3 times that
amount. Oh, wow.
Okay, so think about that. Once again, we have this demand, but we only have this amount of seats, right? So that's an issue that we're all going to have to come together. And I don't want to say, oh, it's warm and fuzzy. It is. No, this is an economic issue. We have Patty. She's here with the Permian Basin Workforce Development Board. It's not an accident that child care is a major issue for the Workforce Commission.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll open with that, and here we go.
I love it.
Right, here we go.
Very thorough report. It's just amazing. Ms. Brown, I'm going to come to you next. We've talked about the enormous need for child care. terrible shortage of childcare workers. You are on the front lines. Share with us your experience.
Well, my experience coming here from Florida to Texas, it's been a major change. And it's the pay scale. And I did some numbers today because I was looking at the salary of a daycare worker. Well, I call it early childhood educator. And that's like $25,000 a year. Well, you can go and work at a local grocery store and make $36,000 a year. In Florida, the starting pay for a childcare worker is $15 to $16 an hour without experience. So in order for us to fill the gap and to maintain what we need to in childcare, we have the seats, but we don't have the teachers. And we have to show more appreciation and accreditation towards the education field of early childhood education because it's not attractive. And the reason it's not attractive is because we don't invest enough in it. And what I've done is try to find ways to cut certain costs inside the childcare facility, making parents responsible for a lot of things. So what we have in our budget to purchase certain things, we make that responsibility for the parents so I can give my teachers a stipend every 3 to 6 months. And that's the way that I show different, gratitude towards my staff to keep them because it's hard. So we have to hustle to try to keep them in that spot so that we can be effective in this early education field.
As I recall, you told me that you have a capacity for more students,
Yes.
but you can't hire enough workers.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. And what we've been doing, we have the capacity of 109, but we have 67, I believe it's 67 kids. And the reason being is because we don't have enough teachers. So what we've been doing is using the part-time student workers to try to accommodate that need. But we have to accommodate their classroom schedule. We have to accommodate, so it's kind of sketchy. And it's hard. It's hard. But if we get them a raise, we can get some teachers.
Get some teachers.
Yes.
Judge, I'm coming to you next. We've been in the habit of talking about child care as it relates to caring for children, which is clearly a huge priority. But I understand from what Dr. Vega says that it is important to think of child care from the perspective of the local workforce. I understand you have an abundance of reasons for being interested in this topic.
Yes.
So I want you to talk about what you were doing in Ector County and what inspired you to become interested in this topic.
Absolutely. So my journey in childcare actually began because I have 3 little ones at home under the age of 5. My oldest has actually started kindergarten this week, so she'll be leaving the childcare system, but I will have my 7-week-old son entering it a little bit later on. And so that was my first experience in this, and coming here and having a child and realizing you got to get on a wait list, and we would have loved to have gotten into Odessa College, but the wait list was 2
A year and a half.
Yeah. How do I manage that? And so there is a desert, and especially in Ector County. In Midland, it's a little bit better scenario with some of the zip codes. But there's 3 different buckets. There's the personal side, but then as an employer of a county of 700 employees, we face a lot of challenges. And one of the first experiences was actually when I was running for the office. I was having a meeting with our county clerk to find out what are the needs, how can I help make her office better to make the county better, and in turn, all the citizens better. And when I was walking back to have the meeting in her office, I noticed there were a number of kids in the break room back there who were playing during office hours. And I asked her, what are they doing here? And she said, well, our staff has to take their lunch breaks to go pick up their kids and bring them here because they cannot afford childcare or can't get in childcare, and so we allow them to have their children here. Now, as an employer, you worry about your employees. One, they're not eating during their lunch hour, and they're going and sitting in a line at a school to pick their children up. But in the back, as a parent of 3 now, I know that when my kids are in the same room doing something without supervision, how productive of an employee are they going to be? And so I got talking with the rest of the county employees and realized this is a massive issue. We've actually conducted some internal surveys of our employees and how big of an issue this is. But as far as the Ector County in general, our median age is less than 31 years old. We are bringing in young families in abundance. Our elementary schools are busting at the seams. And in order to continue to attract those families, which the Permian Basin needs, the oil and gas industry needs. That same Permian Strategic Partnership did a workforce study that said we're going to need an additional 250,000 workers over the next 30 years. How are we going to do that? We need to import folks, and how can we bring folks in if we don't have a way to take care of these young families like myself? And so it certainly is an economic issue. It is a workforce issue. We need to find solutions because we are losing folks to the workplace because family members are having to stay at home to provide childcare because it's simply not an option. In Ector County, over 50% of the children of employees are actually staying with family members and are not in an accredited early childhood facility. And so that's something that's 50% of these family members that could otherwise be in the workforce filling jobs that we know are out there. They're at home with these children, and then there's concerns over the quality of what they're getting. Now, if they're watching Basin PBS and watching Daniel the Tiger, that's a good thing. But if they're just handing an iPad at home, then there's concerns. So it's a multifaceted approach, and I'm glad we're here talking about it. It's a big deal.
Well, we're going to come back to you in a little while to talk about some of the things that y'all are looking into.
Yes,
but Ms. Stewart, I want to come to you now. The Wall Street Journal this week referred to childcare as a second mortgage. In other words, a major expense for families of young children. The costs are rising 6.4% over the past 2 years. The Journal reported that the median price to put an infant in center-based care in 2022 was more than $1,400 a month in the major metropolitan areas. Today, that cost is closer to $1,500 a month, one child. So affordability is going to be a huge issue for families. I understand your organization helps families with this. Can you talk a little bit about what it does?
Sure. So we scholarship families, low-income families. We draw money down from the state and the federal level, and we are given so many seats a day to provide for children. I can tell you right now, as of today, we have over 650 children on the waiting list to get into a scholarship. And so when you're talking about people going back to work, they can't because they need the child care. They can't afford it, as you've just seen with your numbers. And so we're not only not servicing enough people because we don't have the money, because we only have a certain amount of seats to do every day, but now we've got a workforce of 655 children not being able to go into child care on top of that.
And is that based on income?
Yes, it's based on the state median income of 85%.
Okay. Representative Landgraf, I'm wondering if you believe that there is a place for state involvement here. Texas has been enormously successful in recruiting new businesses. Of course, those businesses have to have employees. Those employees have to have child care. So the catch-22, it's obvious to say, I guess, is that it's expensive for families, and yet child care workers earn very low wages. So as mentioned earlier, hiring and retaining staff is an enormous challenge, and to increase the supply of early childhood educators and thus increase the supply of workers in all industries, the Texas Association for the Education of Young Children is lobbying the legislature to invest $1.13 billion in early childhood workforce through recruitment and retention stipends. So your thoughts on that specific proposal and the general idea of the state helping with this issue?
Well, sure. Well, Becky, thank you it's a good question. I think it's an important part of the discussion, and thank you for having all of us here to have this important conversation. The state absolutely has to be part of this equation, and we have been, but there's obviously still more work to do, just given some of the challenges that we've already discussed just here in these first few minutes. Here's really what's at stake when it comes to that. 1 out of every 10 American children under the age of 6, 1 out of every 10 live right here in the state of Texas. That means that we have 2.3 million children across the state of Texas who require high-quality child care before they become school age, like Judge Fawcett's daughter. That's a huge number of children, and that number is only being added to every day. In fact, we have 1,300 people move to Texas and make it their new home every single day. Also on top of that, 70% of all families in the state of Texas with children have dual income parents.
70%.
Or 70%. So that means that that's a very high percentage, and probably the last time I checked, it's a historically high percentage of those families that do need high quality health care before children enter into school. So that kind of sets the table, and I appreciate Dr. Vega also underscoring how important and how widespread this issue is. It really affects just about every young family in the state of Texas. I know, kind of like the judge, my wife and I have a 9-year-old daughter, but before she was in school, we struggled. We were languishing on waiting lists for various childcare options, and it's a struggle, and we can see that so many Texas families are dealing with that. And just to add to the economic ramifications of this, because people can put this in a silo and say, well, this is just this is a family issue,
Right.
or this is, is this childcare or is it early childhood education? I think it's all of the above, and it's also a $9 billion annual deduction from the Texas economy. $9 billion is lost in our economy every year because we have one or two parents having to either leave a job, be terminated from a job because of not having all of the child care in their family accounted for. That adds up over time, and I love the example about Florida. This is why the state has to be part of the solution.
Absolutely.
If we are going to be competitive, if the Texas miracle that we're so proud of is going to continue, if we don't figure this out, other states are going to do it, and that will cause the state of Texas to lose our competitive advantage when it comes to luring Fortune 500 businesses to be headquartered in our state, to have high-paying, high-skilled jobs locate here in the state of Texas. If we don't solve this issue, then that's something where we're going to fall behind. And no offense, but we don't want to lose to Florida on anything. So, or California or any other state that is dealing with this. And to be clear, every
Right.
state has this challenge in the country. It's how we solve for it that's going to make the difference. So what have we done so far in Texas? And again, I love being part of this conversation because it gives us plenty of ideas for what else to do. But we've had a lot of help just going back to the last legislative session in 2023, where we proposed to Texas voters a proposed constitutional amendment that was overwhelmingly approved by the voters of Texas that allows counties or cities to provide property tax breaks for child care facilities. That's something that was not an option before. Now, this is something that every county, every community needs to figure out if it's best for them. But as Ed can attest, it's expensive to run a child care. As Dr. Vega mentioned, we have some of the lowest paying child care worker rates in the country. And one way that we can potentially provide some help is by relieving the property tax burden that those businesses have to pay, because there are so many expenses that go into
Right.
the operation of that kind of business that's something that the state, but really it's local governments can do. But again, that's a decision that has to be made for each county, for each municipality, but that is a new tool that's there. Another thing that I'm very proud of is we also passed House Bill 1615 in the 2023 legislative session that creates partnerships between the Texas Workforce Commission and local independent school districts across the state, where pre-K classes can be offered free of charge in a lot of cases, but it creates the opportunity for more partnerships that did not previously exist when it comes to collaboration between child care providers, the Texas Workforce Commission, and local school districts, because it is going to take everybody. If there were one silver bullet
Right.
Solution, I think we would have identified that by now, but it is going to take collaboration, it's going to take these partnerships, but we have to do it because we have so much that's at stake for Texas children and for the Texas economy.
Okay, you've talked about some things that you all did last session. What do you think about this $1.13 billion proposal to increase salaries and benefits for child care workers?
Sure, no, and sorry, I didn't
No worries.
address that.
No
but,
worries.
So that is, there is quite a bit of talk about that proposal and that recommendation that some groups have offered up. There is a lot of talk about that at the Capitol right now, and for good reason. There's no doubt that amount of money would be very helpful, with regard to this. But I do also know that in and of itself can't be the solution for this, and we have to be very careful about, and I think Patty can attest to this too. Texas is currently spending about $1.8 billion of federal funds that are basically dispersed, that's only addressing about 150,000 children throughout the course of a year. So it's a really, I mean, it's every dollar that's spent can make a difference, but we don't have enough dollars to be able to make these structural changes that need to be made. So would it be helpful? There's no question. Will it help to attract more child care providers? I think that it absolutely could, and so that's why we need to look at that. But anything that we do with state appropriations, if we really want to maximize that investment, it needs to be done in conjunction with some other structural changes and incentivize some of the partnerships that we've already talked about.
And speaking of partnerships, Mr. Crosco, I'm going to come to you. Since you're a business owner, how do you think the business community should be involved?
Well, you know, I think there's an opportunity for us as a business community to invest and to be able to help certain daycares, or particular if our employees go to that daycare or have someone there, maybe we can help with stipends as well. Because I'll tell you why that's important. Because if there's a health outbreak or something, an outbreak in one of the centers, and everybody has to go home, then if the wife's working, who decides who goes to work and who stays? And so they have to share, and so we may lose 3 or 4 employees that day, you know. And then on top of that, if they don't have the PTO or whatever, they're going to lose money. So it's a trickle down effect as far as economy. So I think there's an opportunity for us as employers. I think you see the oil and gas companies now developing their own daycares within their facilities. One, because they're trying to recruit more people to come here, and they need that aspect. And also because it helps, you know, their employees. It helps them stay in the seat and doing work. So I think there's an opportunity, and people say, oh, how can I do that? But it makes sense. You know, us as employers have to think about, we're not going to lose money because we're going to still keep people in the seats and people working. So there's an opportunity there too, I think, as employees to get involved.
We're going to go to break in just a second, but Mr. Mayberry, I want to come to you first. You're in the trenches with your business. What can you tell us about your experience and what you think the needs are?
Yeah, so good question. So I think Childcare is in a very unique place right now. For us, the main thing that we really concern ourselves with is, can we be innovative and can we create some kind of collaboration, right? And that's big for us. So because we're experiencing kind of this unique situation in the sense that our economy continues to grow, our population grows 200 kids every month here in Midland, right? And Odessa is not far behind. And so while that's important and while we celebrate the growth, there's also some challenges of where we're going to put these students, right? And so our challenge is not so much getting staff, right? Our biggest challenge is, how do we create more seats? How do we expand? How do we find facilities and things that we can house the overflow of students who have been born? And so what I spend most of my day, and my wife, who kind of is the mastermind behind all of this, what we spend most of our time doing is, how do we be innovative? How do we create those seats? How do we go into spaces that may not typically look like a child care and make it a child care center? So being innovative, but then also, how do we collaborate, right? We can't do it by ourselves. And so how do we partner with those groups that are willing to support education and early childhood? So, you know, we had some money come in from local organizations here, some oil and gas companies. And so that's where we spend a lot of our time. You know, we see the challenge, but how do we take on the responsibility and be innovative and collaborate and then collaborate with other groups to kind of help this come to fruition?
We're going to take a quick break for about 2 minutes, and we're going to come back with some more questions.
Tune in Friday, August 16th at 8 p.m. and enjoy the sounds of the West Texas Symphony Orchestra as they perform Selections for Chamber Orchestra, conducted by Gary Lewis, performed by members of the West Texas Symphony. Prepare to sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Seems we are to have a visitor.
The king will grant you an audience.
It is good news, is it not?
Now is the time for you to become the king you should be.
I can't imagine a future without you in it.
Can't you see what I feel for you? Your Majesty can form your own opinions. I will.
Basin PBS is looking for vendors to be a part of this year's Basin PBS West Texas Heritage Festival, Saturday, October 5th from 2 to 6:30 p.m. at Centennial Park, Midland. Host a booth, perform, or both. It's free to participate. Scan the QR code, visit us online, or call to sign up your group today. Plus, we'll end the day with a free concert featuring the Wailers. Thanks to sponsors Midland Energy Inc., Abel Hanger Foundation, DMMD, and Centennial Park, Midland.
Hi, it's me, Emily, your Basin PBS Membership Director. Do you know how much your gift of membership means to Basin PBS? Do you know what a difference you make? Your investment in Basin PBS helps make sure more of what you want continues to reach the airwaves for you and everyone you care about. You can visit us online or call the station and talk to me. I hope to hear from you soon.
Welcome back to Basin PBS and our special town hall conversation on childcare in the Permian Basin. Dr. Vega, I'm going to go back to you. You have talked about childcare as an important economic driver, but you have also talked about it as a matter of community values. I want you to talk about each of those things, and also, if you would, share some examples of proven models of cross-sector partnerships.
Sure. So, when you think about what is a community value, obviously out here in West Texas, oil and gas and the economy, but I'd also say we value family, right? But in a very concrete way, and I don't want to be judgmental, how can we actually say that if we're not investing in early childhood? But you see, that's the catch-22. If I was to say invest in early childhood, I think we need to change the language, right? Because some people might say, oh, well, that's an education issue, or it's this and that. But once again, no, it's an economic issue, right? Yes, it's an education issue because, obviously it does make sense for more kids to be prepared or ready for school, right? And there's all kinds of studies that show, obviously, the domino effect of that. So I think it is a community challenge for all of us. So going back to these cross-sector partners, so one of the things that we've done, and at the end of the day, it really is the reason we exist from a model is it's referred to as a collective impact model. And so the idea behind that is to say every community has large macro challenges that are not going to be easily solved. So what's the best way to solve them is through macro solutions. And the reality is childcare is one of these macro challenges. And the way that we're going to be able to solve this is by coming together through cross-sector partnerships. So I had mentioned it earlier, and I know Judge Fawcett will probably chime into this as well. But through the House or the Senate Bill 1882, where a school system is partnered with YMCA in Pecos, one of the things that they've done is they've partnered with the hospital, the regional hospital out there. So they had passed a bond, and I know Ed had referenced this. I think all of us need to consider what are all the resources we have in a community. And in this case, a resource might be a building or a space or a church, right? One of the things I've learned in doing this work, okay, is that we have all the resources in our community to solve these challenges. The bottom line, though, is all those resources may not be in the same box, right? So it's not to where, from a school system standpoint, everybody, especially in rural communities, because that's what we're talking about, right? We need welding instructors, we need welding bays, we need all that. We don't have the resources where everybody gets one of their own. The way that we solve that is by coming together collaboratively. And so childcare is one of these instances. So in Pecos, what they've done is they passed a bond recently, and they're converting one of their old elementary schools in partnership with the hospital to provide more seats or childcare, right? So when we talked about, and I know that it was already mentioned, with our oil and gas companies coming together and saying, look, okay, we're going to just provide for our own, right? That model can be replicated, in my mind, with county entities.
Absolutely.
Okay, or school systems or churches, right? So how do we come together in a very innovative way? And so I don't want to steal Judge Fawcett's thunder, but Judge Fawcett basically, one of the things that we've been doing is once we produce this study, we're trying to get this data out there. As so people need to know. And I think Judge Fawcett, we were at the Odessa Chamber, retreat a year ago, and we shared this. And he was on fire. He's like, dude, how can I get in? And I was like, I'm glad you asked. So Dustin, so how can you get in? And here you go.
Okay, well, so I am going to the judge next. I do want to circle back to you. You have mentioned several solutions that you have been investigating. Share those with us, if you will.
Absolutely. So as Dr. Vegas said, I give a similar analogy of we have all these puzzle pieces, and again, with little girls, we have these little princess puzzles, and sometimes they get mixed up, and you don't know what puzzle pieces go where, but we know we have all of them. We just got to figure out where they fit in together. And so I've been having conversations with the city of Odessa, who has the same problem. We have the same problem with the hospital, and we have the same problem with Odessa College, with UTPB, with all these entities, and we've got great folks at the table, and so we've been partnering, talking about these things, and how do we figure a solution out? And is it that we as Ector County hire our own third party? Or is it that we partner with another entity? And one of the biggest issues that we face is the facility issue. In downtown Odessa, where our courthouse is, we have a few high rises, but if you know the regulations of childcare, you can't have a bunch of 2-year-olds on the 8th floor. It just doesn't work. So we've been working with ECISD, been working with Dr. Murray and with Alicia Syverson, who's been amazing in this. And I actually went and spoke at the ECISD Board of Trustees on this issue. And they've actually passed a resolution here recently that they're going to be utilizing Travis Elementary, which is actually 4 minutes from our courthouse, and utilize 50% of that facility for childcare. Now, there's some steps to get to that place, and we're hoping by January, the upcoming January, that we can get a child care provider in. One of them may be on this panel here today, wink, wink, who can come in and provide this service. And then we internally as Ector County need to figure out how do we offer this as a benefit to Ector County employees. And it's something that we have to have that conversation. We offer a free clinic for Ector County employees. We offer these matching health benefits, all of these things because we're a government tasked with taxpayer dollars. We have to be respectful of how much we pay these folks, and so we have to get creative. But I'm 50 jailers short at our jail, and that's largely because, and these jailers are younger folks. They're usually our 18 to 21-year-olds that can't be sheriff's deputies on the street. Well, if we're that many short at the jail, then that means I'm short 25 sheriff's deputies on the street. And so it goes to, it's a trickle-down effect of employment, which affects law enforcement. It affects the overall civic infrastructure. And this is a piece of civic infrastructure, childcare is. As much as a roadway, as much as the water pipes in the city of Odessa, as much as law enforcement or healthcare, this is a piece of civic infrastructure that has to have a solution. So we're internally at Ector County trying to find solutions to solve our staffing issues. And again, it goes to our pipeline, which I'm glad that we have Odessa College here because I've worked with Dr. Williams on increasing that pipeline, that educational pathway for students to get into the jailer sphere, which if we can get more jailers, we can get more law enforcement officers, and we can fix the law enforcement picture. But we want to leverage our community partners. Like I said, we have the players at the table. We have the puzzle pieces, the resources, the facilities, and we just got to figure out how do we utilize these facilities. Now, we're coming up in next November, we're going to be going for a bond election for a new courthouse facility. And my hope is our current annex facility that houses half of our departments in Ector County is all a one-story facility that we could perhaps revamp into a child care facility. But if on that timeline all things go correctly, then we're not looking until 2028 to have a solution there. And that's not soon enough. We need medium-term solutions, which that one is. We need long-term solutions. We also need short-term. And so we're fortunate that ECISD is coming up with a short-term solution with this Travis Elementary project. And I strongly believe that we have the right people on this issue. But we're going to get there. It takes planting seeds to watch them grow because this is it's our future. These kids are our future, and we need to invest in them. And I think this community is really turning the tide. We've had numerous meetings.
Right.
Y'all have hosted plenty, and we'll throw it back to you.
Right. No, and I don't want to cut you off, but and I will say this is hypercritical to have these community conversations. The direct result of having these conversations, it's not accident that ECISD is thinking about turning their elementary to add more seats. That's a direct result of having these type of conversations, right? Dustin Fawcett, Judge Fawcett, right? His mind is now recognizing, hey, and maybe you did before, but saying that this, as you said, and I like how you said it, that this is a civic infrastructure. That, I think, it's a direct result of having these type of conversations, right? And so that's the value of this when we bring the community together to say, here's the data, here's the challenge. And as he said, you see the domino effect, right? It impacts now safety in the sense of, well, if it's a workforce issue and it's impacting, police officers, EMT, our basic backbone, because they all have kids too and they need childcare.
And I think an important thing in all of this, again, is we have the right players here. And you asked about the $1 billion from the state. Yeah. And we can't rely on the legislature. Representative Landgraf is one of 150 members in the Texas House. And Senator Sparks, who represents us, is one of 31. And that's always going to be an uphill battle. We have to look here at the players at this table and within our community, the elected officials, the business community, because it has to be all hands on deck. Because you think about it, $1 billion, it sounds massive. But when you think that there's 254 counties, because I always break things down into counties, as you can imagine, that's $4 million a county. Yeah. How far does in a one-time allocation, mind you, and that is an expenditure. And we don't need to be looking at one-time expenditures. We need to be looking at investments. Mm-hmm. And so how do we change those allocations, either in the government sphere, in the private sphere, nonprofit sphere, not from expenditures, not a short-term solution, but an investment. And whenever we start finding ways to use tax dollars or use nonprofit, all these other dollars in that aspect, we're going to start winning. And I think we're close.
I love hearing that. Ms. Stewart, you have talked about the state of Texas having taken some actions to improve the quality of child care centers. I think it's called the Texas Rising Star Project.
Yes.
So quality is an issue as well. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Well, every state has their own quality initiatives, and Lanice and I were just talking about that, what they have in Florida, and ours is Texas Rising Star. And so if a provider wants to take our scholarship children, they have to become Texas Rising Star certified within 2 years of signing a contract with us. And it provides quality. It's obviously above minimum standards. There's a 2, 3, and 4-star certification. So obviously, we want everybody to become a 4-star or work towards doing that. And so each level brings out a little bit higher standard within the frame of what they do. And so we have 3 mentors that go out and work with the child care providers and get them prepared for becoming Texas Rising Star. And then we have a state agency that comes out and assesses them and then gives them the star level. And they have to maintain that. They have annual monitorings and they have to be recertified every 3 years. And so as they become certified, then the mentors stay working with them and continue to try and build up either a higher level, or if the providers want to stay at a certain level, they're certainly welcome to, but they have to maintain. There's 4 categories that they have to work with that within the time frame. It's teacher-child interactions, which is the biggest, obviously. We have indoor-outdoor environment, then obviously staff qualifications, and then programs administration. And so it's a wonderful program. As they get on, they get enhanced reimbursement rates. So they don't just get the base rate. They get 5% above if they're a 2-star, 7%, and then 9% above the rate. So I mean, it benefits them as well, and also with dollars that we get down, quality dollars, as they become Texas Rising Star, we give them certain incentives, awards, and that kind of thing. Stipends, we've given stipends before, and so there's also benefits to being that. So
thank you. Representative Landgraf, I'm going to come back to you. The judge tried to let you off the hook a minute ago in terms of state funding, but not so fast. Okay. I know the governor has expressed a great deal of interest in vouchers, giving families money to put their children in private schools. What are your thoughts on cash vouchers for families of preschool children for daycare?
I think that makes a lot of sense, maybe even more so than a broader K through 12 program. And it's also the same reason why in House Bill 100 that was the focal point of one of the special sessions in 2023, where we prioritized special education, education savings accounts for those students who have special needs who cannot get the type of services and attention that they need in a particular school district. And sometimes that would require them to have to travel, but it's a specialized need that could be addressed. And I think in the context of what we're talking about with education savings accounts, that meeting an unmet need is probably, that makes a lot of sense, probably more so than some of the other proposals where we already have plenty of the resources available. So I do think that if we're going to be having that conversation, this could be another way to address early childhood education in ways that it has not been so far.
Thank you. One of the things that we've talked about, Mr. Mayberry, is incentives for keeping employees. And I understand that you all have some sort of innovative things that you do for your employees to keep them. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to give a shout out to Patty and the TRS. She mentioned TRS, and we have a lot of colleagues that are watching tonight, and a few of them, are not a part of the Texas Rising Star program currently. And my wife and I, we started our Childcare Center in our home, and we were a Texas Rising Star before it was mandated by the state to take those subsidy kids. And so it's a really good program. And so I want to give a shout out to her team. We really want to, I really want to publicly go on and kind of persuade some of our colleagues to really become a part of it. And I think the initial part was kind of just packaged wrong in the beginning from people who didn't know a lot about the program. The main thing, what I think a lot of providers and owners thought that they were giving up a lot of ownership of their company by becoming a Texas Rising Star Center. And so I think I just want to persuade or kind of encourage some of our colleagues to just give it another chance and get with Patty and her team to do that. To your question, incentives. So I do spend a lot of time thinking of how do we recruit, how do we retain, but how do we reward our staff, right? And that incentive is kind of the rewards. And so my wife is kind of out of the box on this, and we do a lot of, raffles where you win a 50-inch TV for coming to work, just spontaneous. She'll every one of our centers, the very first room we've ever picked in every one of our center is a break room, a teacher's lounge, and we kind of go all out with that, making sure we provide enough food, water, drinks, snacks for our employees. We do, just bonuses for just being an employee with us over time. She gets real creative in coming up with those. Sometimes it's expensive, but it's creative, and it has helped us a lot. And just creating a place, I was telling Dustin earlier, my one goal is to create a place where staff love coming to work, right? And so whatever avenue that we can do that and how we can be innovative and creative in that, we really try and push the needle on that to make sure that they love coming to work. So that's a big part of how we incentivize.
So keeping employees is important, but Mrs. Brown, I'm wondering, do you have thoughts on attracting more people in general to the profession?
Oh, yes. I've been doing this for 22 years, and the love for it is the attractive part because you have to have the love for it. And so the way that you display the love is you display it on your workers, and your workers display the love on others. And that's what makes it attractive. So, just like Mr. Ed, right? We do a lot of things like breakfast. I cook breakfast. I'm in the kitchen. I make staff lunches once a month. PTO days, I give them days off if we can, afford doing it. I buy them things, give baskets. I throw on birthday parties. I turn on the music on Fun Fridays in the hallways. I'm sliding down the hallway, making it exciting. So the way that I make it attractive, I love up on my staff. And when I love upon them, they'll give me the world. And I know, I say, well, give that to somebody else. And that's when the word of mouth gets out and say, hey, you want to come and work for Odessa College because Odessa College has this and that. And when they walk through the door and they see a smiling director, not the one that's not smiling, I'm always smiling because, first of all, we're here, we're doing it, we're making it, we're doing what we can, we're loving children from 6 weeks to 12 years old, and we're doing it with love. That's the most attractive thing in childcare, well, early education. I'm gonna change the word, early education is love. You have to have love in order to be successful in that. So that's my attraction, is the love.
David Brooks agrees with you. He says we learn from people who love us.
Yes.
And people that we love.
Yes.
Mr. Crosco, are you hopeful for us solving this problem here in West Texas?
You know, I am. You got to have hope. You know, and we're in a great community. We live in a great area of Texas, and I think in the world. In that fact, I'm from Kermit, Texas, and I'm a West Texan at heart. But I think I would love to find an opportunity on how we could help these daycare centers. I know I deal a lot with nonprofits, and it's hard to funnel money through a nonprofit to give to a for-profit. But I think there's a way. There has to be a way, because I think if we can focus on outcomes, focus on bringing together a curriculum that everybody follows, because if we do this together, then we help the ISDs. We help the ISDs, and we help kids when they get to kindergarten. They're a lot more ready than what they were at 2 to 3 years old. So I do have hope, and I think we need to be creative, as a lot of us have said here. We need to collaborate. We need to find ways, and that's one thing that I'm trying to do at the Literacy Coalition, because it helps us as a family literacy organization to improve those outcomes. And so we need to continue to find ways to fuel them and to help the business owners and also the nonprofit daycares as well.
Dr. Vega, I'm going to come back to you. I understand the Education Partnership hosted a conference on this topic recently with Peter Holt and Joe Strauss. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. So once again, you know, once we were able to publish the study, which, by the way, I know that this is on Facebook Live, and I have a staff member here. I don't know if she posted it, but if you go to educatepb.org, the study, and this is actually the study, is on our website. So for anybody who wants to go to the study. So once we published this, the first thing we did is we had a major convening of leaders from the 17 counties. And so we had invited all 17 counties to bring, you know, a superintendent or a judge or anybody from that community, because we wanted these counties to know what the data was. We wanted everybody to know, okay, here's a child care desert, or here are the findings, or what are we going to do? The second convening we held was in the spring. And so in part, there's other, as we know, as we've already said, other communities are trying to address this challenge. So there's a statewide a group called Early Matters that they're really big advocates in trying to build these coalitions. And so in partnership with them, we were able to bring Peter Holt, the owner of Holt Caterpillar, but also the owner of the San Antonio Spurs, as well as Joe Strauss, former Speaker of the House, as well as, so we had a panel, but we also brought the chair or the CEO or the president of the Restaurant Association, right, for the state of Texas, which, by the way, if y'all don't know, is like a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Child care is an issue in the restaurant industry as well. And so we basically brought them together to basically talk about this issue, and Judge Foster was there, Dr. Mary was there, a lot of key community, Ed and Toya was there, a lot of key community leaders was there to get the word out. Our next step in getting the word out is we want to form a business council. And really the idea behind a business council is to get key leaders, champions from Midland and Odessa who are young business owners. They don't have to be young business owners, but it's going to help if you have children, right? And this is a personal issue, children of that age, to come together so that we can also try to figure out some more solutions. The last thing I would say is part of the work we do through these coalitions, we have an early childhood action network, which Patty is a part of. with some of Odessa College, Midland College, UCISD, MISD, but we also have a Midland Coalition, Early Childhood Coalition, and Odessa Coalition, which is comprised of the early childhood from the ISDs, but also local child care providers, Texas workforce, or Permian Basin workforce as well, to basically come together to bring these workers together to come up with some solutions. But ultimately, we're going to have to help, to help solve this, we're going to have to involve the business community.
Okay, speaking of business communities, Mrs. Stewart, a number of local businesses have gotten into the child care business by contracting with national franchises. How do these work? I mean, are they usually just for the employees of the particular business, or are they open to other members of the community?
Yeah. Well, I can speak on this because I worked for Bright Horizons here at both Pioneer and Concho. So I can.
And Bright Horizons.
Bright Horizons.
What?
It's one of them, like Primrose and that.
And it's a
It's a corporate.
franchise.
It's a corporate childcare, and so they can contract. There's various different contracts that they can do because you can, as Permian Resources did, they put their childcare in their building, and Concho built a separate one, and those are their buildings, and they own them outright. But what it is that they contract with Bright Horizons or whoever the entity is, and what happens is then they have to put up a certain dollar amount, the company does, to build the building, obviously, put everything in it, and then the company comes in and they run it, meaning that the employees are Bright Horizons, any legal things are Bright Horizons, it's just the building is theirs. And it has to be sustainable after 1 year on their own. And so that's the way the model works. There's a lot of different ways that they do it. There's been times, well, like with Primrose, they have 3 different oil and gas companies in it. Bright Horizons has one here that has 2 oil and gas companies. And so they can work it different ways. I've seen one model in Austin where they actually, it was for the transportation company, and they kind of had to cut wages and employees. And so they opened up half of the center to public. And so the models are all different. I mean, it's something that the entity and then the other company works out within themselves. And so it can be any kind of model that you want.
You had mentioned earlier that a number of daycare centers have closed recently in the Permian Basin. Could you just mention that for us really quickly?
Well, just in the last year, and I sent you those, we've had, in the Permian Basin, the 17 counties, we've had 5 licensed child care centers and then 5 registered child care centers that have closed, so a total of 10 in this last year. After the pandemic, in 1 year we lost 22, and so that was really large, and that hurt a lot. So,
Mr. Mayberry, is everybody who needs to be involved in this issue involved, or are there other folks that we need to bring to the table?
Yeah, I think there's obviously other people we need to bring to the table. However, I think it's really, we kind of bear that burden personally, and we actually go out and seek those key players who we think, right? And we went to a conference once, and I'm not the originator of this, but someone said that no one's going to save us, nobody's coming to save us, right? And so we have to go out and beat the pavement and create those partnerships and those opportunities. And so I think while there's a lot of people at the table, I don't think it's everyone, but I also think it's our responsibility to go out and show them why it's worth it, and also have a track record to prove that, if you invest in this is what we've done in the past, and this is what we can do with your investment. So there are a lot of people at the table, but not everyone.
Not everybody that
but we'll get them to the table.
That's going to have to be the last word. Thank you all so much for being a part of our conversation this evening. Thank you to Ed Mayberry, Lunice Brown, Patty Stewart, Adrian Carrasco, Brooks Landgraf, Dr. Adrian Vega, and Dustin Fawcett for serving on our panel tonight. Thanks also to the Basin PBS board and staff, along with the Elizabeth Reed Yeager family and the Anwar family for their generous support of Basin PBS. And of course, we thank you, our members, and all our viewers for their support. If you're not a member and you would like to become one, please visit our website, basinpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Becky Ferguson. Good night.